And we also wanted to ask Tanya because honestly, at first, I was just curious whether she works with boys and young men who flee the community too, or if her work is mainly with women and children. But when I asked her, the answer she gave and what she shared about what these boys and young men in this community are going through today, it was far more heartbreaking than I ever expected.
Years and years ago, the term lost boys were these boys from the age of 13 to 21 that were literally dumped. A lot of them in the middle of the desert with no money, no identification, no education. Good luck. You are booted out. And they wanted to keep these wives for the older, more powerful men, older men in these communities. And that we definitely have served. We help anybody from this culture, men, women, children, whole families. And we've definitely served some of the lost boys from the past. These days, what is happening, instead of kicking them out, they are putting them in what is called repentance homes. So if you've done something wrong, and let me explain what wrong means, you looked at someone of the opposite sex, or you got caught listening to secular music, minor things like that, then you would be sent off into a repentance home, which is homes in the middle of rural areas where they're not going to be spotted. And that is where a lot of the abuse occurs. So, for example, years ago, I somebody rang my doorbell at 3 a.m. in the morning, and we know what we do is fairly dangerous. It was very odd, and so my husband, who's not scared of anything, gets his rifle out. He's pointing it at the door, and I'm off to the side, and I'm looking out there. I'm like, "Babe, it's a little boy." And he looked like he was maybe around 10 years old, and there was a man at the bottom of my stairs. And I said, there's a man at the bottom. He's showing me that he's safe. Do I open it or do I not? And he said, open the door. And it was a boy who actually was older than that, but he was so malnourished that he looked like he was only 10 years old. And he had traveled from a couple other states over, and I don't know how they found my personal home, I have no idea, and was dumped off. And he told me his name. I had been communicating with this boy over a burner phone. We dump burner phones when people call and need help, so we know we can talk on a secure line. And and I remember thinking, of his age, I've got to call law enforcement. So he called law enforcement, and they breached the repentance home within probably 18 hours of the report coming in. They transported my boy because of jurisdictional issues back to the state from which he came. And I remember the attorney we work with and myself, we fled down to the state and knocked on every attorney's door. We need help. They found 9 boys, I think, in this repentance home. And when they breached the door in the kitchen, there was no food. There were no refrigerators. There were no freezers. They went upstairs to the caretaker's room. That's what they call the guy who is over all these kids. And they breached that room that was locked, and they found all the refrigerators and freezers lined up against the back lock with padlocks on them. All those boys got sent back to the FLDS community because they didn't want to pay for the cost it was going to take care of these kids, who were all then sent back into the repentance homes where further abuse happened, hit over the head by 2x4s, 5-gallon buckets of water poured over their heads while they lay on their backs, starvation. One kid was sent out into a shed with 30-degree below zero weather with a thin blanket on his back. He had to figure out how to survive for a day and a half out there by himself. The type of trauma and the type of abuse, you do not dare go up against your community because you know these ramifications are so intense. So they were technically lost boys, but they weren't dumped out in our world. Instead, they were being used for slave labor to bring back money for the actual community so they could continue to grow their criminal enterprise.